Stand by for action.
Thanks for joining me. My name is Dave Miller. I am the Unpleasant Blind Guy. This time I'm going to talk about football. And for those of you who hate football, consider it sports in general because it's spread to other sports. And for those of you who hate sports, I've got a great, awesome American at the end that I think you're really going to like. So let's get into it. I'm going to be examining an op-ed piece, that's how I consider it, by Jay Busby, who's a writer for Yahoo Sports, and this was posted September the 25th, 2017. Now I'm taking this long to answer it because it was sort of requested. You'll see why in a bit. Headline for this one is NFL Protest Sunday. What's next for you, the fan? Man, what a Sunday, huh? Great plays, great games, great finishes. And all of it overshadowed by the politics that descended at last on America's largest sport. We'll remember the NFL's Protest Sunday in different ways. With rage, with hope, with trepidation, with admiration. But we'll remember it all the same. This was a pivotal weekend in NFL history. A weekend that will forever after be the trajectory of the league, one way or another. Players, teams, the league itself, all have to figure out how to live in an open protest post-SOB world, and how they handle that over the coming weeks. By charitable outreach, by pallid calls for unity, by pretending it never happened, will say much about the NFL's immediate fate. Well, I'll stop there just to say that I remember that NFL Protest Sunday because I didn't watch, and neither did quite a lot of other people. To continue, but what about you, the fan? Maybe you came out of this weekend infuriated that your team protested during the national anthem. Maybe you came out energized that the league could become a force for good instead of just profit. Maybe you just wanted to watch some football, or maybe you're done with football once and for all. What do you do now? I'll get to that in just a moment. But first, a little metaphor. A bit of sugar before the sermon, if you will. Ever roll up to a drive-thru looking to get a burger or a coffee? You sit there for a moment, staring at the speaker, wondering if it's even on, and then, welcome, you try to speak, you get cut off by the voice within the box, you try again, you speak really slowly, you finally think you got your order out clearly, and you roll around to the window, certain that the communication problems lie with the clerk on the other end, and all the while, inside the restaurant, they're trying to figure out what the hell you said. That's political discussion in 2017. That's where we are now. And that's what we've got to fight through when we try to have any serious discussion about the protests, or the national anthem itself, or football, or really life itself. If you spent any time on social media Sunday, and I kind of hope you didn't for your sake, you saw criticism of protests during the anthem break down over a few major lines. Those ungrateful millionaires are protesting the country that gave them the chance to be rich. What do they have to complain about? If they hate America so much, get out. Adjust spelling, grammar, and degree of coded racism as needed. I'll stop here to say, really nice one, Jay. Not everybody that had a problem with these protests is a racist, dude. I mean, I'm sure this is going to get you a couple of nice interviews, but, really classy, fella. Really classy. To continue. They're disrespecting the sacrifice of veterans who died for that flag so they could play a game. Terming the national anthem a hymn to military personnel is certainly one interpretation, but it's not the only one. Many veterans weighed in on how disrespectful they felt the protests were, while many others noted that they fought precisely for the right to allow these kinds of protests. I'll stop here to say I don't know, Jay, but I know quite a few veterans, and almost none of them were on your side in this. To continue, I'm boycotting the NFL. If this is you, please get back to me in December and let me know how your boycott is going. I'm serious. I want to know who's willing to stick to their principles on this. Well, Jay, guess what? I'm recording this on December the 2nd, 2017. I saved this story back once I saw that just so I could do this. Alright? Now to prove that, let's have a quick look at the New York Slimes. The main headline in today's Times seems to be, Vast Tax Overhaul Clears the Senate, 51-48. And let's see if we can find a few others here. Editorial, A Historic Tax Heist. Yeah, leave it to the New York Slimes to put one of their leftist editorials right beside their top headline. One more. After Flynn, what awaits Kushner and Don Jr.? Well, there's some more news for you, Jay. So this really is December. And yes, I really did wait. And even though you said you were serious, I doubt that you felt like you'd hear from very many people, and maybe you haven't. But I've also seen that the NFL's ratings are the worst in 5 years. And yes, I've stuck to my boycott. I'll continue on to say that I love football. It's a great game. I love the strategy, the tactics. One of my great joys in watching the game is to see an offense line up for a play, and then whatever play they were going to run just disintegrate right in front of them, and yet manage to get that football down the field, maybe even score. To me, that's highlight football. I like seeing a running back bust through a line and get some money. Or a spectacular catch 40 or 50 yards down the field, thrown from the cannonball arm of a good quarterback. Heck, before all this mess started last year, my TV pretty much stayed locked on the NFL Network. I was perfectly happy to pay the extra money involved to get more coverage about football because I love NFL football. But here's the deal, Jay. I love my country more. I don't like missing the games, but I dislike the method being used by these players, whether it's out of ignorance or flat-out racism on their parts. Yeah, that's right, I said it. To continue, it's all enough to make you long for the days when we discussed whether Tom Brady preferred deflated balls, isn't it? And, in my opinion, that's where the discussion belongs. To continue. So what now? Well, this is the point where you, the fan, have to decide what's most important to you. If you're still reading this and haven't already banged out a comment, tweet, email, there's at least some hope for you. Oh, Jay, thank you. I'm glad you think there's some hope left for me. To continue, if you want to boycott, that's your right. If you want to continue to condemn the players as greedy, lazy, ungrateful, hey, that's your right too. But if you'll allow me, I have a simple suggestion. Look, I'm no veteran. I'm a sports writer. When the apocalypse arrives and the zombies show up, I'll only be useful for telling you which of the shambling monsters you ought to pick for your fantasy zombie team. But I've spent a career on the internet, seen arguments both idiotic and sublime, found peace against the caps lock screaming, and so I can offer you just this one bit of advice. Well, Jay, thanks for that introduction. And just so you know where I'm coming from, I've spent over 25 years on the internet. Started out during the last of the first Bush administration, 1991. So I've been here a while myself. Oh, and by the way, I've also studied politics, sociology, society, and how they all mesh for this will be my 50th year. So I'm going to continue with your article. Listen. Listen when the players tell you exactly why they're protesting. That they're not protesting the anthem itself, but rather a system that they feel oppresses people who look like them. Listen to the concrete plans for racial equality they'd like to implement. the efforts they've already made to use their celebrity for good. Listen when they tell you of their own experiences, which might be very, very different from the world where you can lob booze their way. Well, Jay, let me tell you a little something about the world where I lob the booze from. I'm the unpleasant blind guy. That's blind. That ain't because I got a bad leg. I know exactly what it's like to be treated as less than. I've got just enough vision to where sometimes I can pick up the looks that I get when I walk down the street with my white cane. I've had the experience of dressing up sharply to apply for jobs. Attitude, great. Resume, sharp enough to cut through a foot-thick block of concrete. And walking out of that interview knowing I'm not going to get the job, despite the fact that I nailed the interview. Because sometimes you can just tell. I know what it's like to be called blind mother you-know-what. I also know what it's like to be called blind mother you-know-what and have a fist slammed in my face. Yeah, real physical abuse, Jay. I know what it's like to suffer indignities from people's actions based on stereotypes of who and what they think I am. Now, I don't have a problem with people who want to do things so that people of different races get along better in this country. But if I look at those plans, and I say that almost all of it is just a load of socialist twaddle, that's because I'm coming from a place not of privilege, but of real concrete knowledge of what works effectively in this world and what doesn't. To continue with your article, Jay. Listen to the Bill's Lorenzo Alexander explain in detail why the players protested on Sunday, specifically in response to President Trump, and why NFL players as Americans deserve their own voice. Well, you know what, Jay? I agree that they deserve their own voice. Just not on the job. Now, I've worked more than one job, Jay, and listeners, where I've had to sign contracts that include behavior clauses. That's the way it works in corporate America. Now, whether I've liked signing those documents with those clauses in them, I've done it. And I did it because I wanted those paychecks. I'm a huge advocate for free speech. But a contract is a contract. I had to behave a certain way when I was working in certain places, and I don't think it's unreasonable to expect NFL players to do the same, particularly when their celebrity can give them a big platform off of the job. To continue with the article, listen when the Redskins' John Norman describes how stunned he was to live in an America that turned on him and his colleagues so quickly. Well, Jay, I'll tell you, my friend, a lot of us felt the other way around. We felt like the players turned on us. See, a lot of people died, millions over the years, to create that nation, as you said earlier in your article, which gave them the opportunity to be out there on that field. And we're talking about a lot of sacrifices, hard work, long hours, a lot of effort, a lot of sweat, a lot of blood, and sometimes the ultimate sacrifice. Those who came before us, and even some of those in my generation, gave a lot. And the feeling that a lot of fans have is that the people you're holding up as heroes spat in the faces of the nation that allowed them to become millionaires to play a kid's game. So yes, I'm with the people who said that. To continue. Listen when the Dolphins' Michael Thomas gets choked up at the thought of his daughter growing up in a toxic, divided world, and think about how you'd feel if your own children were in that situation. Well, Jay, guess what? Our children and our grandchildren are in that situation. And it's not because every white person is looking to hunt down and kill or enslave or whatever every black person. The misperceptions about racism in the United States of America are simply not held up by the facts. The Jay and listeners, here's the deal. If I thought that Colin Kaepernick had any basis in reality for his protests last year, I'd be out there on the streets with him. No, I wouldn't be breaking windows or burning things or hurting people like most of the people who agree with him seem to be doing. But I would be out there. Because while we've come a long way in the United States of America towards eradicating racism, we haven't finished yet. And we're probably not going to. The only good news about this is that the real race bigots, of all colors, by the way, Jay, are dying out. But it's not going to help that process for people to act a donkey, and I'm using a mild term for what they're acting like, harshing the buzz of a good sports event that should be bringing everybody together, just so they can seemingly accuse all white people of racism. Yes, I've heard all the things they've said. Yes, I actually listened. And so do the other people that don't like what these players are doing, Jay. We have all listened. I know that you and so many others on your side probably think that we're just a bunch of chimps here, jumping up and down, yelling our heads off, with no consideration. No, we did listen. And while we recognize that racism does still exist in the United States of America, it is not nearly as pervasive as these players and the other race pimps make it out to be. I couldn't find a single stat from a reputable source to back up anything Colin Kaepernick or anyone else has said. Not when they say that white police officers are out there hunting young black men. Not when they say that there's systematic racism in the United States of America. Just haven't found the stats, man. And I've looked at places including the FBI, the Obama-era FBI. The same FBI that will not go after Hillary Clinton for her crimes. I've looked there. So let's continue. Listen to the fans who feel betrayed by the NFL, who feel their teams have sold them out, who feel the players have disrespected the flag and the sacrifices of veterans. Their hurt is real, even if their rage is aimed at the wrong targets. Yeah, nice one, Jay. I have to tell you, though, our rage is aimed pretty well. Our rage is aimed at the people whose method of protest stinks. We may agree that racism is a very real issue in this country and should be addressed. But Jay, and you may be too young for this one, go back and see if you can find a song by the Beatles called Revolution. It's instructive. What that song tells us is basically that there is a right and a wrong way to protest. There are ways to demonstrate that will bring people to your side, and there are ways to demonstrate that will close their minds to you with the loudest mechanical clank you ever heard. To continue, listen to the way people and media outlets will twist the protest away from its focus on improving life for African Americans, turning it instead into a criticism of the flag and of America. It's not, and anyone telling you otherwise is either ignorant or trying to manipulate you. What we see, Jay, is what's on the surface. And what's on the surface is exactly what you're talking about. Not a noble protest against racism, just spoiled millionaires out there acting a donkey. They're doing these things on purpose, and they know it outrages people. So yes, what we see on the surface is what we comment on, because it deserves comment. There are other avenues that these people could use to peacefully demonstrate. They chose to act an ampersand $. Oh, and before I continue, who's trying to manipulate who, Jay? Listen to the first part of your own article. You've told us that this is a new era in football, and we're just going to have to put up with the protests now. Well, who decided that, buddy? You? Why is it for you to set the societal norms for everyone else? But we'll continue with your article. Listen to the way the NFL is trying to rebrand this and unify, sanding off the rough edges of the protest into a locked arms message of brotherhood that makes for a better promo. Listen, and don't forget that this protest isn't about the players or the league. It's about something much larger. Well, Jay, it may be about something much larger, but we see what it comes off as. And it's not something that, like football, should bring us together as a society. It's adding to an atmosphere of entitlement that is only breaking us apart as a nation. Or if you want, just listen to Al and Chris, or Joe and Troy, or Jim and Tony, or whoever's announcing the week's game. That's just fine too. But the protests aren't going to go away, and if you try to just ignore them, your rage won't either. Stick to sports is as dated as the VCR. Again, Jay, nice one. You, and probably a lot of your other leftist buddies, are trying to create a new norm. And that's not a new norm that at least a generation of NFL fans is willing to accept. I don't like not being able to watch the games. But Jay, if I want politics, I'll look at the news. God knows there's enough of it. I don't want to be harangued while I'm trying to enjoy my sports. Not even by politics that reflects my opinions. Yeah, there's a shock for you, right? So here's the deal. While for people like you, stick to sports may be as dated as a VCR, there are lots of people for who stick to sports is the norm. And it's going to be the norm. And if the protests aren't going to go away, we'll go away. And who knows? Maybe a new football league will be formed. Maybe a Patriot football league. Maybe a league where players sign a contract that they will behave a certain way on the field. Now, would the football be lousy compared to the NFL? Yeah, the first few years it probably would. But I'll tell you this. I would rather watch bad football played by people who respect their contract and the work environment and the fans than good football played by loads of pandered to, spoiled millionaires. To continue with your article. When you, not just you, dear reader, but me as well, do enough shutting up and enough listening, you start to hear voices you hadn't heard before. I have to stop here again, Jay. Some of us have always listened to voices we haven't heard before. A variety of them, because we're curious about the world. So if listening to voices you've never heard before is a new experience for you, then I don't know that you need to be pontificating to anybody else. But to continue, though, you start to realize there are perspectives beyond your own. Turns out, not every Cowboys fan is a front-running bandwagoner. Who knew? Oh, appreciate the characterizations there, Jay. Really shows your lack of bias. To continue. Maybe you come away still thinking these guys are spoiled millionaires. Hey, thanks for anticipating me, buddy. To continue. But maybe you realize that there's a larger point here than just attention-grabbing and disrespect. As I've said, Jay, there is a larger point, but their method just shows the attention-grabbing and the disrespect, and it's not going to be patronized by either myself or quite a few other people. To continue. And when you're done listening, you can do what we all ought to do at a drive-thru in the first place. Get out of the bubble that's your car and go inside to talk to an actual human being. Funny how communication works so much better that way. Well, again, and this is to the listeners, what Jay is trying to do here is he's trying to imply that anyone who doesn't agree with the protests is trapped in their own little racist bubble. They don't want to talk to anyone of a different skin color. They don't want to have anything to do with anyone with a different skin color. They're just basically part of the basket of deplorables. Well, I hate to tell Jay and those who agree with him, but there are people on his side that are just as locked in, if more, to their unwillingness to talk to the other side. Oh, they're all about free speech as long as they're the ones doing the speeching. They're all about diversity as long as it's not diversity of thought. They don't want to talk to anyone else, they just want to scream their heads off at them and spout pseudo-scientific theories like the one that says white people are genetically predisposed towards racism. So while Jay's busy criticizing people in that camp of ignorant people that he talks about, he may want to check out his own. And Jay, I hope that does it for you, my friend. I know you didn't expect to hear from very many people, but there's one. And I'm going to say what I've said all along. When Francis Scott Key wrote that song, we were a very young country. And yes, we had social problems. We had to struggle with the question of slavery. and make compromises in that area that many, people who agree with Jay, many did not want to make. That was just so we could get started as a country. We had to deal with the question of racism then, just as we have to deal with the question of racism now, and just as we'll have to deal with the question of racism until Jesus returns. Actually, sorry, not sorry, Jay, but I did mention Jesus, because I agree with Lonnie Poindexter, who hosts Lion Chasers Radio, available from 11 to 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Urban Family Talk. Racism is evil, and there's evil in the world. But the one thing that the anthem said, if, again, Jay, people like yourself and others will just, quote-unquote, listen beyond that one stanza that almost no one ever sings, is that we are a full nation. We'll get beat up, we'll get beat down, we'll get kicked around, we'll get drug in the mud, we'll get cut up and messed up. But in the end, we'll stagger back on our feet as a people. Yet notice I did not mention skin color. And we will move forward to create an even better nation than the one that was there 5 minutes ago. Because that's what we do. Because that which makes us a united people was ordained by God Himself. And Jay, if you or if anyone who is listening to this was offended by that, well, what can I say? I am the unpleasant blind guy. And what's my slogan? Truth is not always pleasant. Now I'm going to post Jay's article at UBG Contact on Twitter. That's where you can contact me with comments, questions, show suggestions, awesome American suggestions. It is the main contact point for the show, but I'm also Dave Milner on Facebook, the Tea Party Community, and Connect with Liberty, and I'm Agador on Gab. Now that we're done with that, let's get on to the Awesome American segment. Oh yeah. Now for those of you who don't know, I like to find stories that are about individuals, sometimes groups, but mostly individuals, who are doing charitable, selfless, or patriotic things. Yes, patriotic things, Jay. And highlight them. Because as much as some people feel that the United States of America is just one big racist cesspit, I know that if I took a map of the United States of America and put it on a wall and just randomly threw a dart at it, wherever that dart landed, there'd be someone doing something amazing. And this time's Awesome American story comes from the beautiful Survivors Report by Melanie Gonzalez of KITV TV, Channel 4, Honolulu, Hawaii.
The first thing we asked was, will Bethany make it?
Born premature, Bethany Dela Cruz has been a fighter since day one. Her parents calling her their miracle baby.
Island News reporter Melody Gonzalez shares the story of this month's beautiful survivor.
A baby's first cry is the happiest moment for most expecting parents, but not all pregnancies go according to plan. For Ben and Stephanie Dela Cruz, their due date came sooner than expected.
It was actually a Saturday after Thanksgiving. Came home to bring her to the wedding, and then she started crying in the shower or in the car because something started to get, she started to feel pain.
And that's when everything happened.
At only 24 weeks into her pregnancy, Dela Cruz gave birth to a baby girl. Born premature, Bethany Grace Dela Cruz measured just a little over 12 inches in length and weighed 1 pound, 10 ounces.
I remember when she came out, right? There was like 9 doctors around her, trying to help her breathe.
Bethany's early arrival landed her a 200-day stay in the neonatal intensive care unit at Kapiolani Medical Center, where she received multiple procedures and surgeries to treat many of the complications that come along with being born premature.
She had a cardiac cath, multiple x-rays, I can't even count. One of the biggest issues why we couldn't go home was the feeding and the oxygen.
When you have a premature baby in the NICU, you feel such a loss. You don't have control. This wasn't what you planned.
There to reassure them their bundle of joy would be okay were the hospital staff, who these parents till this day call their angels in disguise.
Amy, Chastine, and Loida, they were her primary nurses.
And they went above and beyond their job because they would text us in the middle of the night saying how she's doing. I would call like 10 times a day. they would respond in a nice way. Support was so great, I was afraid to take her home.
De La Cruz credits these NICU nurses for helping save their daughter's life. Expressing their gratefulness, they invited the three to forever be a part of their family.
They actually became her godmothers.
It's amazing. It brings joy to us. Bethany's primaries, they're lifelong friends.
Never to be mistaken by her size, Bethany proved to be a fighter. Today, this preemie is thriving. She now no longer requires medications.
All we can say is she was too excited to come out of this world. She came out too early.
Bethany will celebrate her second birthday on November 28th, and while she still has some developing to do, both mom and dad are cherishing every moment, even the unexpected ones.
Oh, she's our world. She's the love of our life.
She's tough. She's tougher than the both of us with all the surgeries and x-rays that she's had, medication.
She's everything to us.
Melody Gonzalez, Island News.
And there it is, people. A couple ready to create a new life. And that new life struggling to be. And an entire team of people doing everything they could to make sure that would happen. Even going out of their way to keep that young couple informed. It's that kind of selfless dedication that makes Bethany Grace De La Cruz, her parents, and the nurses and medical staff that treated her all awesome Americans. And that's it for this time. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for listening, and may your God go with you. Goodbye. The Unpleasant Blind Guy is copyright 2017. Anno Domini.